Yo-hoo-hoo!
Okay, everyone, we're live, I think. So glad people are able to join us. I'm Richard from Challenge Post. Thanks for tuning in to the second in our Dev Evangelism 101 series. Not sure how many people here watched the first episode, but I think if you did, the one thing that you might have taken away from it is like how much hackathons are in the process of taking over the world. And I think what we've seen in the last few years is that both the number and the size of hackathons has grown massively. So there's more events and there's more people attending these events. And I think one of the things that's common across a lot of different kinds of hackathons is that the vast majority of them rely on sponsorship to make them happen. So sponsors supporting financially, but also supporting in other ways. And that really brings us to the session that we're going to talk about today, which is how do you sponsor a hackathon? I mean, realistically, it only works as a collaborative endeavor. We've seen a lot of people sponsor hackathons recently as well. And in 2014, on hackathons powered by Challenge Post alone, there was over 200 unique companies a month sponsoring them. And I think what that means for you, right, as a hackathon sponsors, is you've got to break through the noise and really be the signal at these events. And the way to do that is to think of sponsorship as a two-way street. So a great sponsorship adds value to the event and to the sponsor. And the people that do these events best, and you're going to hear from two of them today, are able to create really, really meaningful connections. So the two great speakers that we have in our session today are Brynn and Rob, and these are two titans of the hackathon game. So Brynn is the former director of PennApps, and that's like one of the largest and best college hackathons in the world. And Rob is a developer evangelist with Twilio, and this man has sponsored a lot of hackathons. So what this means is you're going to get to hear both a sponsor and an organizer viewpoint. So if you've got questions, either ask them in the Q&A app or hit us up over Twitter, and we'll take them once we've heard from Brynn and Rob. So Rob, why don't you take it from here and tell us about how to sponsor a hackathon?
Sure. So my name is Rob Spectre, and I have the privilege of serving the developer network at a company called Twilio. We're a cloud communications firm that's based in San Francisco, but I live and work in the greatest city in the world, New York. And what we do is make an API, a product that developers can consume to send and receive text messages and make and receive phone calls within the apps developers are already creating in the languages they already know how to program in. Naturally, as a part of having a unique product that is built by developers for developers, reaching out to developers where they live, online and offline, is a critical component of what we do at Twilio. And the group I have the privilege of serving is called the Developer Network, and our mission is to do just that. It is to catalyze the network of software people to change communications forever. We feel that every single software person that's out there, every single developer, regardless of where they live, regardless of what they do for a living, and regardless of what language they write, or regardless of their skill level, all have the capability right now to change communications forever. And one of the opportunities to catalyze that potential, to realize that possibility inside the mind and heart of a developer, is at a hackathon. Hackathons are one of many types of builder events that are gaining popularity in the developer community, and certainly Twilio goes to a lot of them on a yearly basis. Over the course of 2014, the developer network at Twilio went to 528 different events, of which around a third were builder events like hackathons. And going to them, we've learned a number of things about what makes a hackathon successful, what makes a sponsorship successful, and what makes an individual developer experience successful. So if it's all right, Richard, with you and Brynn, I'd like to share a bit of an illustration of what we do at Twilio when we are coming to sponsor a hackathon, right? Now, when we describe the work that we do as a developer network, it's because we view the developer ecosystem in terms of a network model, right? So there is a constellation of developers that are at a particular event, like a hackathon, and we have this big idea called Twilio, Twilio the company, Twilio the product, Twilio the brand, that we would like to introduce to each of them. And so we send a developer, a actual coder, to these events in the form of a developer evangelist. And that person's responsibility is to make those personal connections between the individual developers and this big idea called Twilio, in the hopes that we can catalyze them to build something that they care about, right? And hopefully, if we do that job well at a hackathon, a significant chunk of the developers that are present are all looped into this network of software people that we're trying to build, right? Now, a lot of folks look at what we do at Twilio and say, like, oh, all you guys do is go to hackathons. The Twilio marketing outreach plan is like going to hackathons. And they usually have a strange voice when they say that stuff. Certainly hackathons have been a significant part of Twilio's success, but I think more importantly what has been a part of Twilio's success is not going to the events, but how we go to the events. And that, at Twilio at least, is a little different than what you might expect, right? Because there are a few options. Like you have a few options in sponsoring a hackathon about how you engage with the developers there. One that is the most obvious is the premium sponsorship, right? So these are the big title, big ticket sponsorships where you get the logo branded all over the place. It's in the head of the cappuccinos that are being served. It's on the side of every ice cream sandwich that gets handed out. There are some people, I'm sure, if they had their druthers, would issue a pair of Google Glass to every single attendee so a small company logo could appear the entire time that they're going to the event. And that's certainly one approach to sponsoring a hackathon, but it is one that is problematic if you're trying to view the developer ecosystem with a network model, right? So if we engaged in such a premium sponsorship, we'd have this constellation of developers, we'd have a developer evangelist, and a brand we would like to connect these developers to. And if you do a premium sponsorship, you will get everyone's attention, everyone's concentrated attention on the brand immediately at the start of the event. Now, the reason why the premium sponsorship can be problematic if you're trying to build a network is brand fatigue. Over time, the human mind has the capability of synthesizing and blocking out brand awareness alone. So if you have your logo all over everything, the longer they get exposed to that logo, the more people will drop off in terms of interest for that logo, right? And so at the end of the event, especially if it's a long event like a hackathon, which can be 24 or 48 or even crazily 36 hours long, you have a diminished return on that premium sponsorship over the course of the event, leaving a huge swath of developers who are now repelled by the brand because of the brand fatigue that it created. And then, tragically, you have a developer evangelist all by himself without any interaction with any actual developers, right? Which obviously is something that we wouldn't be stoked about at Twilio. Another approach is giving away a big prize, right? So this is the solution to the isolated developer evangelist problem. You have those constellation of developers, you have the brand, you have the developer evangelist, and you announce at the beginning of the event, hey guys, we're giving away an iPad. Like, an iPad was something that a developer didn't already have, right? Like, if a developer wanted an iPad by 2015, they would have already gotten one. But you can put in whatever you want for the iPad. You can put, and I have actually seen this, fat stacks of cash money, a lottery for a trip on a low, zero gravity airplane ride. Like there's a ton of different ways that you could do a big giveaway. But obviously, the giveaway has some problems as well, right? Because you'll only be able to reach around a quarter of the audience with any particular giveaway. And over time, very few of those developers that are interested are actually going to connect with the brand, right? So if you have 25% of the overall people who want your iPad or want your lifetime supply of rice-a-roni or want your case of turtle wax, you'll have a lot of them interested in the developer evangelist. That developer evangelist is going to be everyone's best friend. And hopefully one person from each team is going to interact with the product in some way in order to be eligible for that prize, right? Now, there's a big problem with this particular approach, and that's what happens at the end of the event. And what happens then? Brynn or Richard, what happens with the giveaway at the end of the event? You have to unmute, buddy.
So obviously, Brynn, you take this one.
Maybe one team will get it and be very happy, but everyone else will completely forget.
Oh, that's true. That's totally true. Someone gets access to the event, wins the prize, and then everybody else is like, screw that guy. I hate Twilio now because I spent a lot of time building this thing, and now I'm disinterested. We certainly give away prizes at nearly every hackathon we go to, so I don't want to say that it's something that is without utility, but doing something very, very large, like a large cash prize, or, I've been at hackathons where, large corporations have given away cars, like automobiles, at these events. And that's, there is a threshold on the total prize value that creates situations like this one where you have one team that is super stoked and then a whole ton of people who aren't at all. So that brings us to, what we try to do at Twilio, which is something a little different. We try to let the hackers hack. Right? Our idea is that the developer evangelist is there in service of the developers that are present. And that service, hopefully, if we're doing our best work, will create a series of moments where each developer will learn how to do something they didn't know they could do before. Right? Because it's in those moments where you learn something that you didn't know you could do before, that the strong, visceral connections between the teacher and the thing that you're learning gets created. Now, Richard and Brynn, I don't want to mean to speak for you both, but I have a suspicion that if you look back at your educations, you probably encountered at least one super influential teacher in your life. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Mrs. Craven.
You're immediately on her name. Mrs. Craven. What did Mrs. Craven teach?
Mrs. Craven taught drama.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Brynn, how about you?
Yeah, definitely. I've had so many, though. I don't know I can pinpoint.
Righteous. Well, it's always hard to pick a favorite. But if you think to the time, Richard, you had with Mrs. Craven, and Brynn, you were lucky enough to have many people in your life that filled that role. I suspect the bond that you have with those individuals and the thing that they taught you is something that you will carry with you for the rest of your life. Right. And Richard, I see you in the field a lot as a developer evangelist for Challenge Post, and I'm sure you learned the lessons from those drama classes in your interactions and presentations every week. Right. Yeah. Now, obviously, this is a huge moment for an individual, but transparently, Twilio does have a commercial interest at these events. We're not doing this out of charity. We are a business that hopes that folks can use our service. And that's really where the network theory of our approach to hackathon sponsorships really starts to take effect. Because I am willing to bet, Richard and Brynn, that I'm not the first person you've told about these teachers before, am I?
No, not at all.
No, not at all, right? When you learn something new, the first thing you want to do is share it with everybody you know, right? And our hope is if we create those moments where a developer learns how to do something they didn't know they could do before, they will share that knowledge with everyone that they know, right? And make those introductions to other developers and to this big idea called Twilio, such that over time, the total number of people that we can reach with this thing called Twilio is larger. That network surface area is far larger and far denser by the people who use it than the network we'd ever be able to create ourselves. right? And hopefully by the end of that, there are a number of connections that are all predicated around learning something new between these developers, between Twilio, and between these developer evangelists. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
Well, I don't know about amazing, but it sure is a lot of fun, and that's one of the reasons why I feel this job is such a great time. It's not something that only makes sense for the developer community, but it's also something that makes sense for a transformative technology that is trying to get used by as many people as possible. And that's when we're doing our best work, what we hope to get out of every hackathon sponsorship we do.
That's awesome, Rob. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's always incredible, like the focus that you put on like making these connections for moments. I think it's so illustrative, and if people watching this take one thing away from this, I mean, to focus on creating that moment is so incredible. I think that's brilliant. So that's a real kind of masterclass, I think, on like how to approach this as a company. So let's have a look at it from the other side now. So as I mentioned during the introduction, Brynn was a former director of PennApps. This is a massive college hackathon. I'll let
Huge!
Details of it.
Big.
It is really big, correct? And we've actually, in the prelim to this today, we were talking about my first experience at PennApps, and I was just blown away by this event. So I'm so glad that Brynn was able to join us. And just to share, what do you see of sponsors at PennApps? How can they be most effective, and kind of what have you learned?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. So I'm going to try and not echo what Rob said, because I can very easily do that, because it's very, very true. I have some slides I'm going to bring up. Hopefully this will work. Okay, can you guys see the slides?
Yes,
Good?
looking
Okay.
good.
All right, awesome. Okay, all right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sponsoring hackathons. I am Brynn. As I was introduced, I was the director of PennApps for about a year. When we were making that transition from like a 500-person event to a 1,200-person event. I've also been to a lot of hackathons. I travel like almost every other weekend to a different hackathon, and I've helped launch. I've advised other hackathon organizers and helped launch some of the other hackathons that hopefully other people have heard of and been to. Yeah. So how to make the most of sponsorship. First, just some tips for how to, and then after that, I'll talk about how to interact with the actual participants. So, the first step of this, even before having initial conversations, is picking hackathons that you want to attend and that you think you'll get a lot out of. So that's, there are a lot of different factors that go into that. Maybe you'd prefer to be at a bigger event where you can reach more people, or you'd prefer to be at a smaller event. You'd prefer to be at an event that's more established, maybe one that's more local. The best thing to do is really to go on maybe MLH and look for lists of hackathons, or find places that have lists of hackathons. And then, looking around at their websites, trying to get a sense of how legitimate they are, or what their purpose is, or et cetera, et cetera. So most hackathons, again, speaking from the perspective of a student organizer of mostly college or high school hackathons, most of them will have some kind of sponsorship document that'll list some kind of tier system. So maybe, as Rob mentioned, you can be the big sponsor, get your name on everything, and that'll cost a certain amount of money that might be predetermined or not. Or you could kind of, get your name on maybe one thing, or have certain benefits. Every hackathon has different benefits that we like to break up in different ways and put into different tiers. And again, some sponsorships or some hackathons might not even do it this way, but this is kind of where the ecosystem is right now. So when you're talking to organizers, the first thing is to be professional but friendly. I've talked to a lot of sponsors, and some of them will be very condescending because we're students or because we're less experienced, and we're not in the professional world yet.
Hey,
And
Brynn,
that's definitely.
do you think they may also be condescending because they're jerks? They're jerk faces?
Yes, they are. uh, like, condescending is also just part of the problem. We've also had like great, like, jerks is the best way to put it. Angry with us or just for no reason. But again, the best thing to do is just be professional, but actually be friendly and try to, like, I don't know. This isn't supposed to be like a purely business transaction. If you're a sponsor, you're going to be at this. You're investing money and time into this, and you want to make sure that the people with your on your company side have fun, and you're able to speak openly and get what you want out of these negotiations. And so the second piece of advice is don't be afraid to negotiate, because we do have these like strict tiers, but normally, like, we are willing to be flexible with what we offer companies. Maybe you do want to send only developer evangelists and just like have a couple little things that you want to do to be able to get those developer evangelists more involved. Or some companies will just want to like get their name on everything, and that's all they care about, and they don't want to send people. So we are willing to work with whatever. Again, one of those strategies might be better than the other, but usually we're willing to like kind of pick and choose benefits and let the companies actually have more of what they want. And feel free to ask for suggestions. We frequently have sponsors who will ask, like, how do we make the biggest impact? Like, what's the best way to engage students? And we are the experienced people who've been to hackathons a lot and have been running them a lot, and we have plenty of things kind of that we can suggest. Even in the early days, we used to like have these long email threads where we would try to come up as a team with like particular things that we thought sponsors would get the most value out of giving us and providing us. And at the actual hackathon, again, be professional but friendly. We have had sponsors get kind of like have anger problems or have just kind of disappeared throughout the weekend. And those things are definitely not good for getting your brand out there and being able to like engage to the highest degree. We've actually cut sponsors that have been difficult to work with. So definitely, be friendly. Get contact info for like a point of contact or several points of contact on the team. So you want to make sure that if something goes wrong or if there's something you need at any point in time, you have somebody to talk to. And the organizers should provide you with this. But if they don't, it's something you really need to ask for because it's really important. And again, being friendly with that person and being able to like talk to that person openly about it. Maybe if something goes wrong or you really need something, like, it's good to have an open conversation about that. And adhering to the rules is really important. I'm not going to talk about this too much because it should be common sense, but I can't tell you how many times we've had sponsors just like blatantly break the like venue rules or our personal rules for the hackathon, and we've actually cut a lot of them. And it's just left a really negative impression on everybody who attended. Some of them have just said really like not socially okay things at our opening ceremony. Some of them have, again, gotten angry at us. Some of them feel like it's okay to bring alcohol to the venue, which is not okay when your venue is a school. So, again, these sorts of things are actually a problem a lot and should be common sense, so just use common sense here. So, interacting with participants. So I saw last week, or whenever the last talk was, Swift mentioned that there's normally 3 big reasons that companies will sponsor a hackathon. Either product use, like you have something like Twilio, like you have something really cool that you want developers to use, so you're there to really engage developers and get them using it, kind of getting your name out there, like so everybody walks away knowing who you are. And recruiting, like finding the best talent and getting them to come work for you. So I'm going to speak quickly. So if your goal is product use, again, what Rob said is definitely the most important thing. Send mentors and developer evangelists that are very familiar with your product and can help people use it. And again, as I say here, have like a very good set of documentation that you've prepared beforehand. As somebody who's gone to a lot of hackathons, I'm much more likely to use a product. Like if I have an idea and I'm like, oh, this would be great for it, if there is a mentor there who's easy to talk to and who will help me out, and like even, I don't know, is easy to contact, easy to find, and they actually have documentation that I can find online and I could use if that person's not available. And there's some marketing that goes into this too. We'll get into that in a minute. With getting your name out there and getting people to like see your product and know why it's cool. I know some hackathons have pitches at the opening ceremony where you can kind of show off your product for a minute, and doing that effectively, like showing off your product and why it's awesome, and not wasting time with like doing live coding or a like business pitch about why it's amazing, but keeping it like realistic and interesting for the students or the participants is really important. So for marketing, being memorable is most important. Again, I cannot like echo enough engaging actual people and talking to people about your product if that's your goal. No matter what your goal is, like talking one-on-one to people is by far the best thing you can do. If you're trying to get people to use your product, then like establishing these connections and like having people like think back to you teaching them something is by far the best thing. But we also have, I know at PennApps we sometimes have like people who are purely recruiters and aren't really familiar with the actual technology, which is generally a less good way to engage people. But there are a lot of things even those recruiters can do to talk to people and kind of get a sense of what they're doing. I know at most hackathons, like I'll see one or two sponsors that'll like actually talk to participants, like go out and on their own talk to participants and ask them about like what they're building, just to kind of spark up a conversation. And I've actually found that to be very successful. Again, it can be annoying if you're asking like, oh, like tell me about your past work experience or something like that, where like recruiting is very clearly the goal. But if you're just like being an approachable person and trying to like engage people, they'll remember conversations that you have way over just like remembering your name if it's plastered everywhere. Giving away something like cool and interesting is really good for marketing too. So a lot of companies will give away something like a pen or something that's like decently cool, but a lot of companies do that. Some of the most successful things I've seen, like giving away something really useful, like a charger, either like a phone charger or like a like a USB plug-in wall charger, things that like every time somebody uses this thing, they'll see your name and like associate it with the company. And also hosting some kind of event. I know we've started letting companies like sponsor certain parts of the hackathon. So either sponsor like a meal or a snack or even like a cool event that we do. Like we started having a game room at some point because a sponsor like asked us what we thought was cool. We told them it would be awesome if we could have a game room, and like then we like associate that sponsor with that really cool thing or cool event, and we let the sponsor like kind of talk to people more at this event. And again, it's just a good way to like get your name out there more. But again, like unless you're actually engaging people or like engaging your brand with this event in some way, they're probably going to forget what your company is. And purposes, just really echoing the things I've said before, talking like one-on-one to participants about their project is the best way to get to know them and the best way for them to like think positively on your company, as opposed to just like sitting at a booth somewhere or sitting at a table somewhere and waiting for people to come to you. And just being friendly and approachable is really important. But again, if you're looking to recruit, the best thing by far is to have a developer evangelist or a mentor there who's actively like coding with, like teaching people how to code, and actually being helpful to the participants. And I think that's all I had to say. So that's it.
That's super helpful, and I think you raised some like really important issues there. I mean, to me, it's all about like being present, right? So actually, like being part of the hackathon, and I often think, and like some of like what I was thinking about when we set up this session was, I was thinking about the really bad examples, and I think we've all seen some really really bad examples. I've seen people build like really really beautiful booths that had like incredible soft furnishings, and they were just really, really nice places to hang out. And they sent like a great team of people, and they just hung out like in their little booth and like did their own thing, and that was nice. And it was a great weekend out of the office for them. But I'm pretty sure like it achieved nothing for the company. Yep. So really, like you gotta get out there and you've got to be part of this, right? Like that's the kind of main thing. I was interested to hear what you said about side events. Brynn. Like, how well have you seen side events perform, Rob? Is that something that Twilio's gotten involved in, like either like kind of doing like special, like dedicated events within a hackathon? Is this something you've considered or have tried
out? That's starting to gain popularity, right? I think when you look at the number of events that are starting to grow, particularly in the builder space. A lot of events look to differentiate in some way by adding, bolt-on stuff to the hackathon. And truthfully, we have tried to do this several times, and the results were not as strong as getting strong quality soak time with the individuals at the event. My favorite, side event always has to do with enabling developers to be more successful, and that side event is the environment setup party, right? So the biggest hurdle, especially for new developers at a hackathon, is getting their environment set up for the language that everybody on the team is using, right? So if you're primarily a Python developer and you join a team that is coding some stuff in Node and you don't have like NVM installed on your machine and you don't know how to use Grunt and like there's a whole swath of things that would be helpful for you to know. That would be great if I just walked up to another Node developer who knows how to set that up for my machine, either whether it be Windows or Mac or Linux, and get started right away. You shave like 3 or 4 hours of just environment setup, banging your head against the wall, instead of working on your individual hack. So when it comes to the side events, really the ones that we find are most successful for creating those moments where a developer learns something new are the ones that facilitate around the hacking in some way, as opposed to like Nerf gun fights and midnight runs, which all are fun, all are a really great time, but less effective when trying to unlock what we feel is some really strong potential in each developer.
Totally. One of the things that I actually really want someone to step up and start doing at hackathons is have someone who's like a configuration janitor, right? Someone should sponsor a configuration janitor at every hackathon, and this is just like someone who is there to help people get their environments set up and help deal with this. I've been to some of DataKind's kind of data hackathon focused events, and there's like someone that goes to their events and volunteers and who's just good at cleaning up data sets. So it's a lot of data science work there, and I think that's a really great utility. So we actually had a question from one of our viewers, and if anyone else is watching and wants to add a question, either just tweet it with Dev101 or ask it in the Q&A app. But Jonathan asked, and this is a question that I think is going to be at the back of minds of a lot of people that are approaching the hackathon space that maybe haven't been involved in this before. And Jonathan asks, we don't want to use the term hackathon on marketing when presenting the. So when presenting the event, can sponsors change that term? How do we deal with that? Brynn, do you want to? Have you been asked this question before?
Is this an organizer asking or a sponsor asking?
I think a potential sponsor, Jonathan, drop another question in with a comment if you want to explain kind of your role. But yeah, I think we should assume it's from someone who's potentially a sponsor.
Okay, so they don't want to use the word hackathon when pitching it to other people in the company, or Okay, yeah, this has definitely been a problem before. I mean, there are a lot of words you can use to avoid the word hackathon, and in some cases that might just be best. It's always best to like try and explain it if you can, because that is the event you're attending, and like this word is going to keep being thrown around. But we frequently describe it as either like a maker, like a makeathon, like you're making something, as opposed to like hacking into something. Or sometimes we'll go with app development competition, although it kind of sounds a little odd. But yeah, there are a lot of ways you can talk about it and describe what people are doing without using the word hack if that's off-putting. And it is off-putting to some people, and we definitely understand that.
Any thoughts on this, Rob? Because I think this kind of like almost branches into the idea of like how do we explain hackathons, and say that I'm within a large organization, I'm trying to kind of launch an API or a data service. I've heard that hackathons are a great way to kind of do that. Like, how am I going to sell this internally? How do I sell this at the C-suite? Because you and I, we work for technology companies, so obviously we love hackathons, and hackathons are at the core of what Challenge Post does, and I know they're very core to kind of what's going on at Twilio. But if you have any experience with maybe advising people or helping people to try and translate this world a little bit?
It's moments like these where you really understand the luxury of working at a company like Twilio, because our C-suite is ridiculously on board with hackathons, to the degree that last year when Jeff Lawson, our CEO, visited New York once, he asked me and Ricky, a developer evangelist on the crew, if we'd like to forego the fancy dinner and instead have a hackathon for a new product that we were about to release instead with the three of us. So we definitely have top-down support for the phrase. The thing I would challenge you with, Jonathan, is or submit for your consideration, is the phrase hackathon isn't something that any of us came up with as folks that are providing service to these developers. It's a term that came from the developer culture itself, and one that is wholly owned by the people that you're trying to serve at these events. And if that is off-putting, I suspect the developer ecosystem as a whole is going to be off-putting to whoever you talk with. And when you're presenting this new demographic that perhaps your company is wanting to touch for the first time, there is a certain level of commitment to the language and the culture of the people that you're trying to serve. For example, a friend of mine was trying to explain, I don't know anything about basketball, like zero about basketball, and it's March Madness in the United States, so this is a problem. And there was someone who was scoring a point in transition, and what in transition was didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, if I was trying to explain the benefits of a billboard sign behind the home bench, right, I would have to explain that every single time someone was in transition, the brand would have an impression, right? And I don't know what that term means. Honestly, it's a little off-putting because I'm not really into basketball. But if I'm going to understand it, and if I'm going to make the most use out of those marketing dollars, I'm going to have to get accustomed to the vernacular of that particular audience. And I don't think developers are any different.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think as well that one of the things that we can all, as organizers and as people in the community, can be most helpful at is actually translating the environment, right? And I think this goes to a point that Brynn was making in terms of, you can't go into this environment and expect it to be your norms. Your job is to go into this environment and interact in a fruitful way within it, right? And part of that, is always explained to people. And I always like to use the phrase that hackathons are a little bit of chaos, and that's totally okay. Right? It's supposed to be about trying new things and having fun, right?
And
what do you think? So we got another question actually from Brett here. So hi Brett, thanks for watching. So what are the best ways to contact potential sponsors? Is it generally a good idea to try and find someone to intro you, or is it okay to go in cold? And then also for hackathon organizers, how do you feel about making introductions to other sponsors, maybe people that have supported PennApps, for example?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with this. So it's a lot of questions in there, which I normally take like I've had several like hour conversations just about this topic. So the short answer is warm intros, as we call them, like having an introduction from either somebody who knows someone at this company or from somebody who works at the company is best. Just because they're more likely to like actually care about what you're doing because somebody that they know actually cares about what you're doing. But it's totally fine to go in cold too. I've myself sent a lot of cold emails and have worked on like strategies for trying to get sponsors who maybe haven't really heard of you before to be interested in what you're doing. My biggest piece of advice there, I suppose, is have somebody on board who's good at writing, because normally you're going to be reaching out to people via like text, either like an email or with a sponsorship document or some kind of text. And having somebody who really writes well and like has a good command of the language and good grammar is very important to like sounding professional but friendly. Again, having this kind of tone on both sides is really important because as students you need to come off as somewhat professional for companies to want to invest money in you. I know like on our team we've spent like an entire hour fighting about one word in a document because we have a lot of people who really like write well and are used to doing this sort of thing. So that's one piece of advice there. Definitely warm intros better. And what was the last question again?
Yeah, so I think kind of as a hackathon organizer, how do you feel about introducing other people to sponsors? Making that introduction.
Yeah. We pretty much always avoid that just because we've worked very hard to establish these relationships and in a lot of cases have cold emailed a lot of these people ourselves. And giving like private emails of our contacts isn't always something we're comfortable with. There are some hackathons that are more comfortable with that, but there are other I will make introductions for other things frequently. Like I've made introductions to Richard before, like for tools that we use at the hackathon. I also made an intro to Rob recently for a hackathon organizer who wanted to use something like Twilio or Challenge Post. But in terms of like an actual sponsor, I don't always feel comfortable with that. Again, because we've worked so hard to find these sponsors, but it depends on the case.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Rob, what about from your perspective? I think that Brett's kind of thinking about perhaps trying to raise sponsorship for a hackathon. So you must get a lot of inbound requests for sponsorship. Can you give us like a really quick overview on kind of how you think about that?
It's definitely a significant part of our program, and Eva Sasson as our head of logistics for that particular part of our program, and her work here is invaluable. She is up till midnight, nearly 4 nights a week, answering emails and handling logistics around our event sponsorships. If you think about 2014 being 528 events, that means Eva probably talked to around 1,500 different people about opportunities that are out there. I mean, we get a lot of inbound. We're grateful for the inbound. We're also grateful for any intros that you have for events where you think Twilio might be of service. So if you have one, rob@twilio.com, send it our way. But does that have a material impact on whether or not we decide to sponsor? Like, does the warm intro or the cold intro make a big difference? I'm not sure that it necessarily does. We're not a VC firm. Like we're not making $1 million investment in something like having a clear, network referral process is not something that is super necessary for us to decide to sponsor. We sponsor first-time hackathon organizers all the time, and first-time event organizers of any stripe all the time. The three things that we need to see in that first email, regardless of whether it's a warm intro or a cold intro, do you have the demonstrated ability for this hackathon to provide power for all the participants, provide Wi-Fi that won't break, and a safe environment for every hacker that's attending. And if we don't see those first three things in the email, it doesn't really matter who introduced us. We're probably going to say no.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, the safety it's just paramount, right? These are physical events where a lot of people are there, and I think it would be irresponsible of any company to sponsor a hackathon without doing some diligence on this, right? I think that's key.
And the safety is a lot of different things, right? Like it's safety for folks of all backgrounds, whether they be ethnicity or gender or sexual orientation. There's safety. Ruins a emerging hacker's sense of community, like the violation of getting their laptop stolen, right? Having some sort of sense of that being taken care of and staffing the event appropriately is key. And then a big thing is safety, which we are concerned about at Twilio, that I feel there should be more concern in the industry as a whole, is the safety of your ideas, like the safety of your intellectual property. There are a number of hackathons that require you to sign like everything you do belongs to like shady megacorp, and I don't think that's an experience that we feel we want developers to be going through. So those are the kinds of things in terms of safety that we look at.
I would echo that, and I just want to add, those kind of hackathons, you won't find them on Challenge Post. We don't list anything where there's an intellectual property transfer away from the developers. It's not cool. It's not what you should be doing. If you want to get stuff built, pay people to build it. So there's one question that I think we've all kind of dodged, right? And it's like really at the core of the sponsorship experience. And Trish, we are going to get to your question. We've got time for that. But I want to float this one to you both, which is, what are the dollar signs we're talking about here? I'm thinking about launching my API, or maybe I'm actually really just trying to recruit developers. So I want to get a presence in hackathons. So what should I be thinking about in terms of the cost, right? When we're writing the budget, when we're getting ready to do this program, what are we getting involved in here? What are people looking at? And I know it scales massively, but let's try and put some order of magnitudes around this for people. Would you like to kind of give us some overview of this, Brynn?
Yeah. So it varies wildly, very, very wildly. There's some hackathons, I think PennApps at this point doesn't accept sponsors that are less than a few $1,000s, just massive amounts of money. But there are also some hackathons where they're happy to accept a few $100s, or even they'd be happy to accept in-kind sponsorship. So maybe providing a service, some of them, providing food, some of these other things will count as sponsorship at some hackathons, and at some they won't. Yeah, so it just varies so widely. It's hard to put an exact number on it.
Right. Yeah. Rob, what do you think of in terms of costs, right? Because obviously hackathon organizers are trying to get the events funded, and getting the events funded and be able to deliver these really big events. I mean, there are some significant costs involved, right? Mm-hmm. So what should an evangelist or someone that's doing outreach for a technology company be thinking about in terms of when they weigh the cost and maybe even the ROI on sponsorship? I know that's a massive question.
Well, it's an important one. And I think everyone in the business of marketing, which I'm still very much a novice in, this is my first marketing job, so a lot of this is certainly new to me. But I think all marketing is, especially in the wake of companies that have nailed this exceptionally well in the mobile space, like Uber and Airbnb. Everybody's trying to figure out their customer acquisition cost, their CAC cost for each customer, and making sure that that number is lower than the lifetime value of that individual customer. And for me, for my money, having seen a number of the ways that you can expose developer tools to developers, I'm not sure there's anything that is as cost effective as these builder events, as these hackathon events. For a sense of scale, Brynn, I know you mentioned that $3,000 is a significant sum, and there were days when that was a significant sum for a hackathon. But to give you guys a sense of scale, you take that same level of interaction, right? Same size of the logo, same placement on the T-shirt, same booth table size, and you place it at an event at like Oracle Open World or Java 1 or these large enterprise trade shows, and you're going to take that decimal place and you're going to move it a couple spaces to the right, right? Like these are extremely expensive shows. Now they can be extremely lucrative. They certainly have had value for Twilio. For reaching certain types of developers, but the sticker price as these hackathons grow is still an order of magnitude lower than any other live developer outreach tool you'd be able to use.
That's awesome. So we're going to take one last question from Trish, and then I think we'll wrap up and let everybody get on with their weekend. Yes. So. Trish is asking, is anyone using customer relationship management tools, so CRM platforms to manage communications between hackathon organizers and sponsors? And I think this goes back maybe, Brynn, to some of your earlier points about kind of having that communication with the organizers be at the front of your mind as a sponsor. How do you find that? Are people kind of automating this? Or how are people tracking it?
So I haven't seen people use CRMs too often. Again, I think the events are almost a little too informal for that. And it's not always the best way to reach somebody, like in case of an emergency or at the last minute. So we've played around with CRMs, and again, we've just had trouble like keeping the team sticking to it and integrating with it. We pretty much use email for most of our communication, and we set up phone calls and hangouts and whatever we need to. And we try to do that as often as possible because, again, that like actual like person-to-person interaction is the best thing to have by far. And yeah, again, at the event, we have like a place that sponsors can go find us when they need us. We don't really want to have like a lot of middlemen and in between, like waiting for email to go through or waiting for something else to go through, and phone numbers for them to call us in case of emergency. But yeah, it's definitely worth trying. Maybe like once, seeing how it goes. But again, we found it was hard to like pull our entire team on board with that and make them stick to it.
Right. So I think that we're kind of at the time where we're going to start wrapping up. I just wondered, like, Brynn, Rob, do you folks have any final thoughts you want to leave people with as they're approaching this issue?
Go ahead, Brynn. Go ahead, Brynn.
Do you want to go?
Sure. The big thing that, and I usually have a call at least once a week with someone who is doing developer outreach for the first time. And the thing that I always try to impress upon them is the developer is the most discriminating consumer you could ever market to. And the key to success is meeting them as a peer. So not talking down to them like a marketer, not talking, sucking up to them like a salesperson, but meeting them as a technical peer. Respect is the only currency that matters with developers. And preserving that respect is something that you should be keeping top of mind when you look at these sponsorship opportunities. Hackathons are an excellent way to interact face-to-face with the folks that are going to be building the future that you and I live in for the rest of our lives. And approaching that with a due amount of reverence and with technical people that can meet them as peers, I think is key.
Brynn?
Let's see, I guess from the organizer perspective, organizers are really here to help you get the most out of being a sponsor. But we only have so much time to throw into like helping each sponsor individually. So thinking about what you as a particular sponsor are looking for and coming to us with like a set of questions like, can we do this? Is it okay for that? And keeping it open and being like friendly. I think that's the best way to optimize your experience, because any given event will have like really cool things that you can get involved with, or some other events might not have the same kinds of opportunities. But being able to talk to the organizers and being able to talk to the participants is by far the way you're going to get the most out of any event.
Awesome. I think that's great, and that's a great message, right? That it is all about making connections. So, like, invest in the time to really double down on making those connections with the organizers. Everybody wants this to be successful, right? More successful sponsors means more events supported. It means more hackers inspired to learn and build and show off what they do. And I think that's the reason the three of us are here, right? Is to try and make that happen. So I just wanted to say, thanks so much for everyone that watched this, and like a massive thanks to you, Brynn and Rob, for sharing all of your experience here. I think it's a super valuable session. Everyone, the next Developer Evangelism 101 session is going to be going deep on metrics. So that's going to be really fun. We're going to look at like, what are the key metrics that you should be thinking about when you're kind of building out your developer outreach? So we've got some great speakers lined up. So follow at ChallengePost on Twitter, or follow myself at FWD Media, and we'll announce the date of that. We're just getting it worked out now, and that'll be our next session. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks again to Brynn and Rob, and happy hacking everyone, and see you soon.
Thanks, Darrell.